Now, there's been much criticism leveled against the National Prosecuting Authority due to perceptions of a lack of effectiveness in prosecuting, especially high-profile cases. United Democratic Movement leader General Bantu Holomisa has been the latest in those voices that have questioned whether the NPA and its head, Advocate Shamila Batohi, are fit for purpose and whether the country has derived value since her appointment. Now, if we look at what's happened since Batohi, of course, has been appointed in that position, and Holomisa has been very scathing and says this has been going basically very slowly since Batohi's appointment. She was, of course, appointed by President Cyril Ramaphosa as National Director of Public Prosecutions in February of 2019, with the President promising a serious overhaul of the entity under the leadership of Batohi to make up for the years that this institution was hollowed out through corruption. Now, UDM leader General Bantu Holomisa joins us now virtually to have a further discussion. General Holomisa, thanks for your time. Welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you and good morning to all.
So some would say that from the start, Advocate Batohi was up against it because there was immense pressure to actually investigate, prosecute, corruption and all the cases that were unfolding in the country, whilst having to do this with an institution that had been hollowed out to a great extent and perhaps still infiltrated with people who were not necessarily going to assist. But you say, and I quote, you said that Advocate Shamila Batohi is a dismal failure and you have asked her to resign. So explain to us, what you base that particular statement on and why you want her to resign.
Thank you. I concur with your introductions on this case. There is no doubt in anybody's mind that there was a legitimate expectation on the part of South Africans that the appointment of Batohi would indeed bring a new image to our legal, to our program of combating corruption. Unfortunately, or fortunately for her, she identified the problems early by saying she needed budget, she needed to appoint competent people. Parliament accepted that and she was given money. But when she took over, you must remember that there were about 600 dockets which were pending. Then fast forward, the Zondo Commission was established. And then what we have seen so far was the charging of Agresi only, but the fellow travelers with Agresi, like some ministers, are still roaming the streets of South Africa, actually undermining the resolve by the President Cyril Ramaphosa when he ascended to power to say he's going to clean up this mess. The recent loss of two cases, that of Gupta's extradition as well as the Newland case in Bloemfontein, tells us that she is a dismal failure. I mean, on small things like attaching warrants of arrest in the case of Gupta's and other things. What is she there for? What is she doing?
So just to extrapolate that a little further and to get your thinking about this, General, you say, the NPA is failing to do simple things like attach a warrant of arrest is the example you give. But why do you think there has been this sort of dismal performance, as you put it? Do you think that there's a possibility that there may be some in the department who are still working against the NDPP, or is this simply down to her and her incapacity to actually take charge of a department? What would you ascribe it to?
If I were to venture to answer your question, that would be tantamount to getting into high-level gossip. That is why we are calling for the President to establish an inquiry to test the fitness of Batohi. So I'm not going to entertain those questions. It's only the inquiry which can summon someone who was asked to prepare, for instance, the docket or the case of extradition of the Guptas. We won't get it in speculative way.
So last year, Advocate Batohi made a commitment before Parliament that some of the state capture cases will be brought to court within 3 to 6 months. So as an oversight body, what has been the number of cases that have been brought to court? Has that commitment been fulfilled? And again, just in tracking what has been done, did she deliver on the commitment that was made to Parliament?
Unfortunately, maybe I live in exile in my own country. I've not come across the progress on implementation of Zondo Commission's findings. As she said, those who were fingered in the state capture, they will be dealt with within 6 months. That was a positive stance on her to suggest that indeed she did get the money and employed the people which the NPA has been complaining about all the years. So that inquiry I'm proposing will expose all those, and she would be given an opportunity. Why did she misled Parliament?
So you believe she misled Parliament by saying that, General, and okay, you say that you actually want a fact-finding mission per se to look into all of that. But also last year, the NPA announced that they had met with the State Capture Commission to solidify some of the collaborations that they had in mind. Do you know whether there's been any further development on that? What's come out of those collaborations?
I might have missed that, the outcome of those collaborations. I don't remember any. In actual fact, we have been saying that the NPA must work closely with other law enforcement agencies, right from the beginning of the Zondo Commission. That Zondo Commission should always issue interim reports so that the law enforcement agencies can follow up these cases. But unfortunately, we didn't see much of that. Now, when they started to charge people out of the Zondo Commission's findings, they are losing those cases. That's society too.
And I think this particular issue is one that's very important because it perhaps speaks to more than the NPA. And I know your focus here is on the NPA and Shamila Batohi. But do you not believe, General, that there has to be a wider net cast? If you look at what happened in Parliament at Scopa this week with some of the security cluster heads who were there to speak to the ESCO matter, what was your assessment, if you did watch that, General, in terms of how that could possibly be linked to what seems to be going on in the NPA? Because I'm looking at that cluster overall as the criminal justice cluster.
Well, for the NPA, we must understand that the cases which are attended by the NPA have gone through SIU, sometimes Hawks, and police. So we are saying, at least on those straightforward cases, the NPA must perform. But in terms of the security cluster or the law enforcement agencies, whatever term you want to use, I don't think that we have competent personnel there. This is another department or sector which have been victims of the so-called deployment policy of the ruling party, where they put people and use those people to chase others in the process. So I think after elections next year, this is when perhaps you will begin to see a government which is serious to deal with this state capture saga, and also to make sure that the people have confidence in our law enforcement agencies. We have to change the political landscape after elections next year. If we don't do that, we will continue to suffer for the next 30 years.
And I'm glad you touched on that, because something you said earlier on as well, General, where you spoke about the NPA having asked for money, and that Parliament acceded to that request, and they were given money. But much has been said about how poorly resourced the NPA is, and not just the NPA. So if you look at 2020, the Anti-Corruption Task Team, they told Parliament that they lacked capacity to finalize some of the more complex corruption cases. One thinks of the case of Marcus Jooste, for example. What is your view on this, General? Because one has to ask, is government, setting these entities up for failure? Because if they are not properly resourced, then surely we cannot be surprised if they then fail in a bid to actually prosecute some of these high-profile people that yourself and many others would like to see in the dock.
Well, when you use the term resource, it could mean they are not financially resourced, but we have already answered that question, that they were given money. But in terms of personnel, that's the problem. That's where the problem is, because we deploy weak people in order to manipulate the systems. So it's a chicken and egg story, my sister. I'm sorry.
And also, General, as we wrap this up, just to clarify this inquiry that you are calling for, just give us a sense of, exactly what its parameters would be. Would it sit in Parliament? Because I'm just thinking as a lay citizen that, this country has gone through so many commissions and so much money has been spent on these. And if you look at the return on investment, so to speak, South Africans would say, well, we're just throwing good money after bad. So how do you explain to South Africans that this is actually a worthwhile exercise, should it be undertaken?
Unfortunately, some of us are not ready to raise the white flag in the middle of the battle. So we will continue to be voice of conscience and tell the government that wake up, otherwise the people are going to take power to their own heads. And normally they use disobedience practices and exercises. So let us not lose hope, because we are in a big problem where you have cabinet ministers and high-level officials who are running the country, yet the NPA, which is supposed to do its work, is neglecting that. That's a wrong signal we are sending to the would-be investors, both inside and from those who are outside. So we have to wake up. Unfortunately, we are not going to be worried about non-implementation of those findings. The goal must be to change the government and put people who are going to be effective and regain the lost ground.
Well, General Holomisa, we'll leave it there, and perhaps it would be good to get the NPA in to hear from them why it is that, as you say, they are proving to be a dismal failure when it comes to prosecuting certain cases. UDM leader General Bantu Holomisa with his views regarding the NPA and the NPA head Shamila Batohi, whom he calls a dismal failure, and asks President Cyril Ramaphosa to establish a commission of inquiry into her fitness to hold office. So let us know your thoughts on that at Morning Live, SABC.